Pia Oberoi is a senior advisor on migration and human rights for the Asia-Pacific region in the UN Human Rights Office and joins us now. Thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. I know you've had a chance to catch up on Cordelia's documentary. What were your first thoughts? Were you shocked by what she uncovered?
I mean, sadly, this is an issue that we've been following for some time now, as you know, and the issues that she's raised are very prevalent in the region. We're very concerned about the human rights situation of large numbers of people that are being forced by fraudulent means into these scam centers around the Mekong region. And we've seen, the high levels of violence that's perpetrated against the people in the centers, the coercion, and really we're seeing this as a human rights crisis around the region.
And that's what's so shocking, as you describe, and as we've seen in Cordelia's report, that the levels of violence, the intensity meted out on these victims, because that's exactly what they are. They are victims, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the issue stems from, a kind of growing, we're calling it a polycriminality around the region, where there's, kind of a dovetailing of a number of illicit activities, including, of course, drugs, wildlife trafficking, financial crimes, but really centered from a human rights perspective, in these industrial scale scam centers in certain ways. And the durability, really, of these operations is of serious concern. We've been tracking this since 2021, and it doesn't show any sign of decreasing, sadly.
And what else have you found? You've been a part of this report. Take us into some of the detail that you've uncovered.
Well, one of the concerns really is that the durability is not accidental. There's a high level of profits that are being generated. It's a very lucrative enterprise where we're seeing something like over $60 billion per year that is generated through these criminal activities, which means that it's also causing a great level of instability in the region. So you have conflict-affected border areas which are being drawn in. We've seen these compounds in special economic zones. And there's links really to corruption at high levels. It's fueling conflict, for instance, along the Thai-Myanmar border, because the profits that are being generated are being used by armed groups. So it's not only a crisis, of course, for the people that are being drafted into these centers, but it's more broadly causing a great level of instability in the countries.
And from your investigation, seemingly growing as an industry.
Yes, absolutely. And this is the concern, is that, that we haven't seen a drop. What we've seen is a displacement situation. So where there have been some law enforcement activities, there has been a displacement into other areas. And I would like to say that the reason, the durability is not accidental. It's linked in to very, very entrenched corruption networks, for instance, but also linked to a lack of civic space in the region, lack of media freedoms. We've seen journalists that have been involved in investigating these crimes being prosecuted and punished. And we really see that a solution doesn't just lie in law enforcement. It doesn't just lie in stamping out the criminality. It really means that there needs to be structural changes to ensure that you have, media freedoms, you have civic space, and that you have a structural crackdown on corruption.
And seemingly governments are aware of these scam centres, but yet they still exist. How so?
Well, we know that the governments in the region, in different ways, have been making efforts, and certainly it's a very complex issue. As I said, the criminals are increasingly professionalized, and so are, of course, the operations. So it's not an easy thing for the governments in the region, which are struggling with their own issues around economic and sociopolitical situations. That said, there is a need, in a sense, to look more deeply and more seriously at the issue. We've had, for instance, very recently a joint statement between ASEAN and China on online fraud. But if it is only being addressed as almost a surface level law enforcement issue, the kinds of structural changes that we need are not going to be addressed. So we're really calling on the governments to look at this as a whole of society, a holistic approach to really being serious about making their societies more resilient to these kinds of crimes, to enabling the kinds of watchdog functions that media and civil society operate to be able to really address the root causes of the situation.